Thursday, February 12th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today on the show, how women navigate the personal, professional, and systemic hurdles of deciding to run for elections. The starting point for this conversation, a new play called If She Runs. Today's panel will dig into the question of why does it matter if we elect more women? All right, I'm just looking at my screen in front of me here. If She Runs by Ruth Lawrence. Final draft, January 12th, 2020. I don't get sent play drafts very often, so this is really nice. How you doing?
Good, I'm good. I know, and that one I think it's been updated a little bit since that. February 7th is the latest date on mine.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a couple guests here. We'll get to everyone else shortly. We're going to have someone on the phone as well in a little bit. For the audience, as you're listening, the text line is open, 709-327-8206, the signal at cbc.ca. Just tell folks about the play, and then we'll start a discussion around it.
Okay, so If She Runs came about when Jenn Deon was the artistic director at Persistence Theatre, and she was we were approaching the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote in St. John's. And so she said, like, if we were going to do something to celebrate and maybe it was a play, how would you feel about that? And I have been a political nerd as long as I can remember. Like the first leadership campaign that I watched, I was seven. So, yeah, because we only had CBC where I grew up in St. Jack's. And so I was into politics early. And I think it was the theatrics of it. I think I've discovered that's what I got really attracted to. So I've been a political watcher and like supporter and like enthusiastic fan of politics for all my life. And I said, well, Jen, did someone tell you that? She said, no. And I thought, oh, well, I'm a political nerd, so I might be a good person to ask to do this. And I really was interested. I'd written something a few years back about women getting the right to vote back in 1925. But I knew I wanted to do something more current, mainly, Adam, because I was feeling a little bit hopeless about the state of gender parity in politics. Yeah. And also not just that, but like what kinds of things women were, all politicians, but women in particular, were facing when they did enter the political arena. And I felt as a participant in the political system, I also felt a responsibility to try and make things better, or at least ask some questions about why. Why do we treat women this way? Why are women perceived this way in the political arena? And why don't we have more gender parity? So those were sort of the questions I went in with. And that's how this play came about. It's 3 acts. We take them from so the first act is them getting the nomination. Second act is them running a campaign, election campaign. And then the third act, we meet them 2 years into the mandate.
And there's audience participation.
There is some audience participation because I thought, how do you write a show about politics and elections without having a little bit of, a teaser with the audience? So they're kind of it's an interesting approach to the polling.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool when I was reading through, and I was just wondering, like, did that get cut in the most recent draft?
No,
okay, it's
still in.
Okay,
it's still
good.
in.
And we'll talk about that. So this is the jumping off point. Professor Amanda Bittner is back, gender and political behavior professor at Memorial University. How you doing?
Hi, good. I'm excited about this audience participation I'm hearing about. So I didn't read the script, but I'm going tonight to opening night, and I did not know about this.
Yes.
So
there's a little bit. It's interesting. It was fun last night in the test run.
What can we tease about audience participation?
Well, so as I was developing the play, I was also thinking about, like, what are the factors that go into what makes us vote for the person that we choose to vote for. And obviously I was thinking about a lot of my own biases, but I was also asking other people, like, what do you think about, and also what are the things that you don't admit to thinking about? And it was the things that people don't admit to thinking about that have mostly made it into the poll. Cool. Because it's a secret poll. You do find out at the end how people voted, so you know like what the audience temperature is. But that's where it came from. Was really about the things that we conscious/unconscious biases that we have. So I think there's 6 questions in the end. I used to have 9, but now there's only 6.
So your participation is polling. I love it.
We poll the audience.
Like my dream come
during
true.
The show.
Amazing. I can't wait to see this.
Yeah.
So, Professor Bittner, a play about women in politics and with polling. So this is like, like I know the Super Bowl was recently, but here we are for you. What are, for this out into the public and what this can generate for conversation and thought? Like, what are your thoughts around it?
So there's so many ways we could take this conversation, but I guess what I would start with is the beautiful kind of confluence of storytelling with facts and important information about how people think and how the world works and things like that. So as a professor of polling, this is very exciting. I've never encountered this before. But, we talk about, we teach how polling works, for example, and how voters think and all the ways in which voters, yes, there's things that they don't admit that they think about, but there's things that they don't even know that they think about.
Yes.
Because so much of our brain does its own work without us actually deliberately moving it around. But one of the things that I've been experimenting with more in the classroom, and I have done some polling in the classroom, like what it sounds like you're going to do, but I don't actually know what you're going to do yet. But the other thing that I've been experimenting with is increasingly assigning fiction in the classroom, even for political science. So I'm not an English prof. I don't teach literature. But one of the things I've kind of come to see, especially over the last few years, is that we can assign students a journal article to read with stats or polling or whatever. And that's fine, and that gets the message across. And I mean, I think it's super interesting, but it's also the case that for the average 18, 19, 20, and 22-year-old, having them read something that is a novel or a poem or a play or something else allows them to really experience that thing from the inside. So I can tell them, yeah, women are treated differently by political parties, by voters, by all kinds of people. And students will be like, okay, sure, I believe you. Here's the data. Or they can experience it firsthand through the eyes of a person who's running for politics, has the nomination or whatever, and they can feel it in a way that's very different, even if their own life experience doesn't reflect the things that they're reading about. So trying to get students to really get the content, fiction allows it in a different kind of way, and so I'm really excited about this play.
Yeah, so I did a lot of research for the play. So I talked to a lot of female politicians, both municipal, provincial, and federal politicians. Some were currently serving, but most had retired or stepped back. But I also fictionalized a lot of things. So I took, I would say that
the essence.
Yeah, the characters are composites, but I was amazed at the overlap between experiences of people too.
We've got Gillian Pearson back on the show too, former candidate for the PC party. Also, you're always involved in political discussions and everything else. How are you doing? Thanks for coming back.
I'm doing great, and honestly, just to see political conversations kind of happening within art, I don't think it happens enough, because when you bring these conversations through different mediums, like play and theater, it just makes those conversations a little more accessible to so many other different communities. And there are so many people who want to have these discussions, and sometimes sitting down with your girlfriends and being like, let's talk politics.
I mean, I do that all the time.
That sounds super fun.
All your friends, I have a poll for everyone.
I sometimes do, yes.
But it's really nice to be able to kind of, center that intention around something, right? So myself and my girlfriend are going to do a Galentine's Day and take in the play. So
fantastic.
We're really excited about that. I will say on the polling, I mean, I'm part nerd, part organizer.
Yeah.
So I love, obviously, like the academic polls, but the saying is the only poll that matters is on election day, right?
Yeah. Which I've the number of times you hear that over the years, right? From I remember, I guess, former Premier Kathy Dunderdale when she was in because we'd always go up and be like, "Oh, polling says this," and this would be the line. Can I ask you, as someone who ran, what was the thought process of just like, I believe in this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to put my name forward, and here we go. Like, what was it like for you to do that?
I would say my experience was probably not unlike a lot of women candidates, where I knew that it was something that I was potentially interested in. I didn't think that it was going to happen or I wouldn't have the opportunity so quickly when I did in 2019. But, a lot of people encouraged me to do it. And much like the research shows, I was just like, no, women generally have to be asked more often, whereas, men tend to raise their hand more eagerly or more early.
I think women are on the more generous end of the Dunning-Kruger scale than where men can be from starting off. But yeah, okay.
Well, no, for sure. We generally rate our skills and our, abilities usually like a little bit lower. We're a little safer, more cautious on that side maybe. But at the time, I was just, there were some issues in my life and kind of in the province at the time where I was, very involved in driving those conversations, and the opportunity came up. And for me, it wasn't necessarily about, okay, well, this could be a potential career path or an opportunity. I kind of, probably did things a little bit backwards and said, okay, well, I'm just going to dive into this conversation, just see where it goes.
What, now looking back, 2019, it feels like it's just like yesterday, but it's a little bit more than yesterday at this point. What's your feeling of that decision and everything that kind of transpired afterwards now when you look back? Like, you're looking back as this, was it a good thing? Are you happy you did it? Were there learning lessons? Were there things that you wished kind of didn't happen by putting your name forward like that?
So honestly, like it definitely did change the trajectory of my life and some advocacy work that I was doing at the time. So I was very vocal about affordable, accessible childcare and different issues that disproportionately affected women in the province. And I will say that at the time I was actually on maternity leave. So I had a preschooler and I had a baby. And the fact that I was on maternity leave, that's actually the only reason I was able to run because I already had that absence from work. And I had at least some income, and there were no rules against that. I mean, I had some other things going on. I had to go back to work in between, but no regrets for sure. And I think that for a lot of candidates, sometimes the decision to run doesn't always necessarily mean that the path leads to election. So I think there's a lot of considerations there, certainly for women.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I can just say, I encourage you to run again, because most of the women who I know who have run have had to run multiple times to, gain that name recognition, to gain the confidence, and also to, unfortunately, to gain the trust of the voters. So I certainly hope that you will consider running again, because the first time is the first time, in my opinion. It needs to be a series, to really get there.
The gateway to more, right? Get in, get used to it,
get
your name out, keep going, run again. Anything speak to you on this, Professor Bittner?
Well, Ruth is right. The first run is just the first run. And I've been trying to tell Jill to run again for years. So I'm always happy when I hear that again. Because, the data support exactly what you just said, and you did all this research, so you know this, that every campaign, there's a chance you're not going to win, right? But the campaign allows you to learn all kinds of really important stuff about how to run a campaign, about the financing aspect of things, how to fundraise. One thing I know from Jill's campaign, Jill, if you don't mind my saying this, I did some research on women's fundraising in the past few elections in the province. Jill raised a ton of money, way more than the average candidate in that election.
Yeah.
She's a really good... Well, I'm not going to keep on talking about Jill all day. But
so important, though.
Yeah,
those are all the skills that you have to gain.
Exactly.
And how are you going to come out of the gate with those?
Yeah, so there were a lot of candidates that ran in the last election, too, just recently in the province, who I'm hoping will run again.
Yes.
It was their first time. They learned a lot. They hit the ground running. But we know that the second campaign, the third candidate, they're going to win.
Yeah.
And it's just that name recognition for sure, but also the experience that you gain as well on the way.
Yeah, and one of the other resources that I used too when I was researching the play was Equal Voice. I had already gone to 2 or 3 sort of workshops and gatherings, networking events that they'd had in the past out of pure interest, not because I wanted to run.
Because you're a nerd.
People keep asking me to run, and I go, no, I like to be a participant, but I'm not going to be a candidate. But I've gone a few times in the past, and I go when they organize debates or talks. And so I went back to them and said, hey, would you share some of your resources that they do in their campaign school, which is nonpartisan. Anyone who's interested can go sign up for campaign school and learn all the stuff that both Jill and Amanda just talked about. Like, you'll learn a little bit about, these are the steps. This is the process. These are the things you have to learn how to do, or get a team who knows how to do it for you. And I found that really, like, for me, it was invaluable to have all of that, collected in one place.
Yeah, locally, Equal Voice does such great work.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
And for the help and everything.
Yeah.
We've got MHA Sherry Gambin-Walsh on the line. Placentia St. Mary's, Miss Gambin-Walsh, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you very much.
Thanks for taking the time to come on the show. So, as a current sitting MHA, the part of the conversation you're jumping into is essentially we're asking about what does it take for women to participate in politics. So we were talking fundraising, we're talking encouragement, sometimes running more than once, getting your name out there for yourself as a veteran politician now. What did it take you in the beginning?
Well, you know what? There was a path to politics, right? And I mean, as an individual, and what I find amongst my colleagues and all women that are interested in politics, we face like internal barriers and external barriers. And like with the internal barriers, I find that like anyone who's had like personal negative experience as a child, that stays with you throughout life. If you had exposure to bullying, and most recently you have some famous people like Lady Gaga, for example, who's out in the public and she's talking about barriers that she faced. And I mean, how good could she actually be if she didn't have to deal with those barriers? And then you have the external barriers, which are huge, and they're prior to politics and they're throughout politics. You have sexism, so you have to learn to deal and address that. I mean, the number of times that I have heard as a politician, you got to have a tough skin. You got to be tough to be a politician. I never once heard that when I worked as a nurse or an executive director, but I hear it as a politician. And then you get ageism. Older men, they get described as being experienced, while women are often judged on their appearance. We get criticized for our clothing, we get criticized for our hairstyle, and we even get criticized for our facial expressions. I actually have a comic in my office. It's me one time when I was doing something about licenses and the expression of my face, and I have that in my office for everyone to see, because you know what? I am a politician and I have been exposed to this type of stuff, and I don't think I needed to have a tough skin. I think I needed to have a path and a vision and a reason why I wanted to go into politics. I mean, I had to go through party gatekeeping in 2015. I don't believe that I was the political choice. I ran 2 nominations that year to get where to get to be the candidate. The first time was against 3 men, and the second was against 2 men. And then there's money. There's the financial barriers. So you need money. In 2015, it cost me $11,000 for the 2 nominations. That was my own money. You can't fundraise for nominations. Then the election itself cost $21,000, of which $10,000 came out of my pocket. So the total for me that year was $21,000. So you got to have access to money, and this is the first time since this is my 4th election, and it's the first time that I actually had more money donated to me than I needed to run my election.
Wow.
4 times it took me. So, there's a cost to this. And you have to deal with harassment too, and harassment intensifies once you get elected. I've actually seen in my 10 plus years as a politician, I've seen a couple of my colleagues be pushed out of politics because of harassment, online harassment, body shaming by anonymous accounts. Initially I was on Twitter and Facebook, and I mean, it was, it's a route to get information and to get information out to my constituents. But around 2020, I think it was, I had to just stop Twitter. I just had to come off that account. It was hacked, and I had to leave the platform. I couldn't get my platform down, but I just left it altogether. And recently with Facebook, There's an account. It's called Republic of Newfoundland and Labrador. I have no idea who that account is. It says the address is Confederation Building. And recently I blocked them because I didn't know who the account was. And I mean, I don't have time to be, interacting with individuals or accounts that I really don't know who they are. I didn't know if it was a constituent. I had no way. I did my best to figure out who it was. And when I blocked the account, they then took my picture and put it up on Facebook. And I don't know, but there was like over 200 comments. And a lot of them were very rude about me as a politician. So I had to deal with that. Now, they recently checked it today, and it's down. They recently took it down. But, I mean, like, that's the kind of stuff. So, like, what do you need to run? It's not only what you need to run, it's what you need to sustain yourself and to stay in politics.
So Ms. Gambin-Walsh, let me put that to the folks here in studio, too. And do you have, like, how long do you, like, I know we said you're on for a few minutes, like, 10 minutes. Like, how long do you have? If you want to stick around, you're invited to stay till the end of the show. Okay, well, excellent. Well, then, welcome to the club. Just give me a second.
Very good to have you, Sherry.
Welcome to the club. We're out at 5 to 1 today, half hour earlier, most Labrador, because of the Olympic checkup. I'm saying that out loud so I don't forget it. Thoughts for folks here in studio on what Ms. Gambin-Walsh is saying?
Well, there's a couple things that come up immediately for me. Thank you so much, Sherry, for adding to this conversation. And I would also add racism, and certainly, like, it doesn't have to be overt. It can be, microaggressions that I've heard, certainly from friends, but also when I was doing my interviews. And as you know, Sherry, so Sherry came to see, I think the last public reading that I did, Sherry, you'll be happy to know maybe that I was in a very dark place at the time of that writing. A lot of what was coming up from the United States was impacting me, and certainly around the world. Like, the women have had a rough go, to say the very least. And so when Sherry came to hear the reading, I was nervous the entire 90 minutes because she sat right by me, and I thought, oh, Lord, what is she going to make of this? Because I knew where my play was going. And when it was over, Sherry, I remember looking at you and saying, I'm so sorry. And you said, oh, this is nothing I haven't dealt with twice this week. Yeah. And it shook me. It shook me so much that when I was writing the play, I had written a reminder to myself at the end of the play, like my outline, my treatment, my draft. I wrote the line, leave the audience with hope. And I knew I hadn't. That last draft that I'd done before the one that we see now was rather hopeless. It was hopeless, and I admit that. Because it was what I was feeling. And so I went back after hearing from Sherry, hearing from other people that night who said, oh no, this is reflective. This is not, you're not making this up. But it did give me the ability to go back and go, okay, I got that. I went through that. I got that out. Now I can go back and write the play that I want to. I want to have some inspiration. I want to have some hope. And I want to encourage people. Because every single woman I interviewed, Adam, said to me at the end, even if they told the same horror story that I just heard, a day earlier, they said, I just don't want to discourage anyone, any woman from running for politics. I don't want anything I say. I'm saying it like to give a heads up and to talk about my experience, but I don't want to discourage anyone. And I thought, I can't do that either. I had to go back and remember that the spirit of what they were telling me and what I believed in my heart is that we can't be afraid. We can't be pushed out. We have to stay involved, because that's the only way we are going to see change over time. So that's what I wanted to add there, inspired by what Sherry said. Professor Bittner, any thoughts just on what everyone's saying?
Yeah, I think that the reality is the job is hard. Politics is a job, but politics is a very, very hard job where people like Sherry are expected to be available to voters and colleagues and everybody 24/7. And when you're not, so like you leave Twitter or you don't use Facebook, suddenly you're the devil, right? So this is an issue number one. But I think that what we have seen is that sort of Ruth's vision of having hope is a really important piece of things, partly because things actually are changing. If we look at the face of candidates today compared to even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, massive changes. And with those massive changes, our understanding as voters of what a politician looks like has also shifted. So, for example, we have stereotypes about women, about men, and about politicians, of what their personality traits are like or should be like. And 10, 15 years ago, those were very different stereotypes about women versus politicians. They were like two different complete apples and oranges. Whereas now what we're seeing is voters are shifting their kind of basic attitudes about what politicians are like and what women are like. And so it's like a apple-orange hybrid now to a certain extent. So as times change, as the legislature changes, as the face of who's running in politics changes, our attitudes as voters change, as we become more comfortable with people that aren't that kind of stereotypic prototype from 50 years ago. It's not just old white guys who are in there. It's also women. Yeah. It's also Indigenous people. It's also racialized people. It's also newcomers to Canada. Like, there's lots more variety. And the legislatures tend to look, I mean, not exactly like the population, but certainly more so than they did in the past. And so with that comes attitude shifts. But it's coming on the backs of people like Sherry, who are bearing the brunt of the punishment. And I mean, I'm just a nerd who works at a university, but I have also received death threats because of things I say about politics and things I say about, you know, gender and things like that on the internet. And so if I'm receiving death threats as a weird nerd who's working in my office with my desk and not many people, you can imagine what it's like when you're in the public eye, in the public face all the time. And so, you know, she shouldn't have to have a thick skin. She's right about that. Unfortunately, though, you know, Sherry, you've had to develop a thick skin because of the kinds of things that you've experienced, and that's not fair. And so my hope is that will also shift, that we'll respect individuals, whatever their job might be, and you know, appreciate that the job is hard and support it.
Well, the fact that I think people feel that they can say whatever to politicians that you would never say to someone in a workplace,
Absolutely.
in a grocery store, even at your family dinner when it goes off the rails for Thanksgiving. You still wouldn't say it.
Exactly.
And yet there seems to be in this province across the country, globally,
Gloves off.
right?
Yeah,
That
gloves
it's just
off.
a
The
permission that people
anonymity
feel.
that comes from the social media is
Yes.
definitely a piece of it. But I think even the old school way of doing things, like the number of times that people have listened to me, let's say, talking on the radio like this. So in the last election, as an example, I did an interview with somebody's podcast. Somebody took the time to send me a letter to my place of work where he told me, "You were quite boring." So you've taken all this effort to tell me that I'm boring. Like, thank you very much, sir. Like,
Yeah.
but it's
thanks.
way worse on the internet than that. And
But-
sure, I'm a nerd. I'm a professor. We tend to be boring sometimes. But wow.
Yeah, it's like
effort.
this was part of your day was to do that,
Imagine.
to follow through.
You can say nothing, as my
Right.
grandparents always said. Why? Why are you
know.
doing this?
Jillian, what are your thoughts?
I will say, I think the anonymous accounts are a particular issue in small political jurisdictions because there are a lot of people who are among colleagues and peers, and they don't necessarily want to either be, you know, targeted themselves or, you know, to, I guess, face consequences because so many people know each other. And I just feel like the anonymous accounts that do exist here are probably, you know, felt a lot more acutely because we're aware of, you know, the handful that are, you know, pushing whatever discourse there is.
You know, it's like you got some cowards with some, let me see, Sierra Hotel India Tango opinions.
Nice.
You know, didn't know if I could land that one.
Very nice.
And to, you know, Sherry's point, I mean, like, people just think that they have a right to have access to you all the time, and that access comes with, you know, no holds barred. They can say whatever they want. I mean, there's been an ongoing court case, I think, involving, you know, Stephen Guilbeault. I think it was settled outside of, you know, the court. But I mean, people don't need access to a politician on social media. There are formal channels where you can voice your opinion, where you can access them. And I think that, you know, women receive different types of criticism than men. Like Sherry said, you receive criticisms on your voice, on your looks. I can't tell you how many people at the door told me, you look a lot younger than I anticipated. And while they're not explicitly in their mind saying, well, I would never vote for her because she's a woman or she's too young, those things are very coded. When you have a young man running, they're like, good for you. I can't believe you were
What a go-getter.
interested. What a go-getter. Wow, you're such a young, ambitious man. And then and especially when people found out that I had a baby and a preschooler, they thought that I was insane,
Yeah.
quite frankly. It wasn't good for you. It was like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a degree of truth to that, but...
Yeah.
I notice it, like if I look at, if we're talking social media, from my journalism colleagues, like if you look nationally at some of the bigger voices and just look at what gets directed towards the women compared to the men,
Oh, yeah.
big differences. Even though there's a lot of abuse,
Yeah.
I think
sure.
there's definitely a study that can be done on the accusations of bias. I find compared to that's just me kind of looking from back, right? Ms. Gambin-Walsh, any thoughts on just this part of the conversation?
Yeah, I do actually. I look at politics, and this is a rare opportunity that we have. Someone asked me yesterday, what would you advise your younger version of yourself? And I tell the younger version of myself not to be naive about politics, that the competition never ends in the political arena. You need to be more confident in your decisions, but you need to be always open-minded to advice from your senior colleagues and those whom you represent. And I do want women to know that this is a very rewarding job, and you can impact change positively in this role. This is a hard job. It's very demanding of your time. It's a time seeker. It's 7 days a week. But you must always remember that there is life after politics. So you have to be mindful of the impact of your choices and your decisions on other people's lives. We have a very rare opportunity in government right now, today. The Minister of Justice is also the Minister of Women and Gender Equality. Now, this may never happen again. And as a recent Minister of Women and Gender Equality myself, I know the negative impacts that intimate partner violence is having on so many people in Newfoundland and Labrador. And now is the time for impactful changes to happen in the justice system. I mean, there's so many things that need to be done. And when I was the Minister of Women and Gender Equality, one of the barriers in government is you got to consult with other departments and other ministers and trying to get their ear and trying to get their time. And that is part of the reason why things move so slowly. But now we have the same person as the Minister of Justice and Women and Gender Equality. I mean, there's things that we wanted to do. We wanted to create a provincial victims of crime support unit. We wanted to expand the intimate partner violence team to further help victims, process trauma, access mental health support, understand the rights, navigate the system. And, prior to, I was the minister just for a very short time, from May until we went to the polls. But I had opportunity to speak with people who are impacted personally by intimate partner violence. And I know what they want. They want to get in and advise ministers. They want to be able to advise the Minister of Justice and Public Safety and advise the Minister of Women and Gender Equality. And I think they have a right to do that. When I was the minister responsible for seniors, we had a senior advisory committee, and that committee was so valuable in helping me shape legislation. And the same thing in service and elder persons with disabilities. I mean, I leaned on that committee to shape the legislation that we brought forward in the House. And what a better way to bring legislation into the House than with the support of the people that you represent in the province. I mean, what a better way to do that? You go into the House and you don't have a protest for what you're bringing forward, and the opposition knows that this is what the people want because you shape that legislation by consulting with those very people. I mean, the opportunities are endless. Yeah.
One of the questions in my intro, I said, why does it matter if we elect more women? And I'm not asking that directly right now. I think if you're listening to this show, obviously all of the comments so far until the end of it will be answering that. This is The Signal. I'm Adam Walsh. The jumping off point for today's discussion is a new play by Ruth Lawrence called If She Runs, right? Commissioned by Persistence Theatre. We're talking about navigating the personal, professional, systemic hurdles of deciding to run for election in this case in Newfoundland and Labrador, and represent people, and why it matters to have representation of women in politics and the road that has been traveled to get to this point. Ruth, what else surprised you or did you learn through this process of research and all the interviews you did? Because we're talking fiction, but we're not, right? Like you said, it's reality, and you're looking at this story being like, and I want some hope and I want some of this, and you're trying to tell this really impactful story to kind of show reality, but also uplift.
Yeah, it was interesting, and certainly we're talking a lot about the negatives, unfortunately, which is where your mind goes to, because of course there are so many hurdles and stuff. But as the actresses who are portraying Viola and Dawn in my play said, it's so great when we get to celebrate the things that the victories that we have. So those we often do, not that we forget them, but they end up taking a back seat sometimes. Like Sherry was saying, like Gillian, like Amanda, we can't forget that there is so much progress. Like things do look different than they were, and when we have an opportunity to celebrate, I think that we should. It was interesting to me on that. A few weeks ago, I was listening to the radio, and there was an interview with a former prime minister, or maybe president of Finland. She was a young woman, and I think actually her term might have ended in 2022. Yep. And she was young, vital. She used to get criticized for dancing, for going out dancing and enjoying her life. Got roundly criticized. And I heard such an inspirational interview with her where she just said, I'm a young woman. Look at me. I want to live my life. And I thought, that's an excellent example for us.
I think it's Sanna Marin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I just thought, wow, that is such an inspirational. It was just an interview that I thought, okay, wow. This is what we need to hear more of, is that we yes, of course, we have to be strong. We have to have that, shield we put on to make sure that we don't give in and listen to all this stuff, that the negativity coming, but then to actually be able to say, yeah, I'm going to celebrate the things that I accomplished, while in power, but also celebrate the freedom of living my own life too. And I think that's something that we tend to put aside, because we think once you're a politician, that's it. You don't have your own life, but you do, and you should be able to have it. So
not feel that you don't have to make apologies for it.
Yeah,
it's like, no,
exactly.
I'm doing this. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Even though there's critique that may come with that.
Yeah, and there was lots of those stories around the world, certainly, that I heard, and I go, wow, these are really inspirational women leaders leading the way, making incredible change in their countries, from Guatemala to there was just so many amazing stories that I went, oh yeah, this is why I'm writing the play, actually, so we get to hear more of those. Even though I wasn't focusing on them, I really wanted to know about the stories that were the inspirational ones, that women who were changing things, not just for themselves, but for others.
So then what is
behind them?
So then what is hope? Sorry, Gillian, go ahead.
And that's a really important point that we need to put to all of ourselves. And we're all very guilty of evaluating, potential candidates based on, what we believe is a traditionally good candidate. So, one of the things that I encountered when I ran in 2019 was that there were, so many people telling me that you have to be very visible in the community. You have to be at Tim Hortons every morning during the election. You need to try and go to every community event possible. So is that the things that we're evaluating a good member, a good minister, a good member of caucus for? Is that how many bake sales or how many coffee runs that you can squeeze in? And for sure, those things signal that community is important. But when you have someone who is not as visible in traditional ways, in ways that you expect probably a man to behave or to have time in their schedule, is that really fair? We have to make sure that we are evaluating the, compatibility and the values of what we want to see in someone in non-superficial ways. And I think that is a challenge that we really have to just put to ourselves. Well, so-and-so is always there. Okay, but, is that a measurable way that you can feel like your member's serving you well? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
But it's also being open to, like, you shouldn't have to feel you have to get 5 across in the rubber chicken bingo card in order to feel like that's the only way you're serving your constituents.
Yeah.
And women, they are way more likely to have caregiving responsibilities, responsibilities for elders. They have, on average, more layers of commitments and responsibilities than probably what an average male near retirement age candidate would have.
Sure, Gambin-Walsh, I mean, as a sitting MHA, what are your thoughts on what Gillian's saying there? Oh, hello. 1 second. I think there's a mute button. There we are. Sure, Gambin-Walsh, over to you.
Hi, I'm listening attentively here. One of the things I will tell you after 10 and a half years experience is that you do have to be accessible to your constituents. You absolutely do. I mean, they elect you not only to represent them, but to help them navigate the system. And showing up at the Tim Hortons or showing up at the school concert or the hockey game or just being there as a person enables you to be accessible to your constituents because they see you, they come over, they talk to you. That's where you have the conversations. That's where, you help them navigate. And that's honestly my availability to my constituents, attending events and working more than likely 6 to 7 days a week is really what got me reelected over and over again. What I really enjoyed, of course, was my part as a minister and the legislation and helping impact change and knowing that when I look back after my political career, my name is on legislation and there's been positive impacts. And some of them are visual, the accessibility site, car parking that we have throughout the city, the increase that was done under my watch, and helping persons with disabilities, which is one of the reasons I did come into politics. I came in I was an advocate, an executive director for persons with disabilities. I have a son with disabilities, and it was really my path into politics and my final decision of why I wanted to come into politics, because I did want to impact change. But I really enjoy the constituency work. That is my favorite part. I enjoy being on the ground in the community. I have 54 communities. My district is geographically
54.
huge.
Yeah.
54 communities, and it's geographically massive. So I look down through my schedule. I plan my events. Usually every weekend I am at an event somewhere in my district, sometimes 2. This week I've already attended 3. And, I was in Placentia yesterday. It's Winter Carnival. But I had to work in between all that. And when I go on vacation, I work. Like, I will probably take 2 hours at the beginning of every day to go down through my emails and see what happens. The last vacation I was on, we had a disaster down in St. Mary's with the fish sauce plant. So you have to be available, and it's unfortunate, but that is part of this job. This job requires that you are available to your constituents, and you can try to go on vacation and not be available, but it doesn't always work in your favor. You will come back and you'll have a lot more work to do than before you went. So I often found that, if I checked my emails and if I was available a couple of hours each day while I was on vacation, I really enjoyed my vacation, and I came back rested and I had less work when I came back. And I also have a very understanding and supportive husband that understands what being in politics means. Now, did I lose some of my friends since I came into politics? Yes, I did. My circle is smaller, but I still got my real friends there. And, that's the reality of this job. And I don't think that's just a female thing. I think that's males and females, and it's this role. It's this political role. It requires your time. It requires you to be available and to be present and to be there, so constituents can see you and access you.
Yeah, I don't think emergency at the fish sauce plant is in the brochure when you sign up for politics, but it's all these things.
Exactly.
But it's a serious issue, and it happens, and it's part of the unpredictability of politics and that MHA district work that has to be done. Amanda Bittner, I saw you taking notes. Those for later, or do you want to share with the rest of the class?
Well, they are for later. I was reflecting on your original question that you posed to us. Why does it matter if we elect more women? And I don't want to put words in anybody else's mouth here or do that. And I think that one of the points that Sherry made here is a really important one, which is that the job it requires certain things of us. And that's true whether we're women or men, or it doesn't matter. And I think that's really important and important to remember that this is a very tough job that is very demanding and requires us to be in the public in a way that other jobs don't. And so those of us who don't like those requirements shouldn't gravitate towards this job because it wouldn't be a good fit. At the same time, of course, the encounters that different sitting politicians have or candidates have with the public are different depending on all kinds of demographic factors, including gender, including race, including class, all kinds of stuff. But going back to that question about what does it matter, I think that the answer is, multitudinous, and we can go down to all kinds of different rabbit holes. But let me just sort of say two to start with. The first is an issue of kind of justice and democratic principles. That the legislature is designed in a democratic system to reflect the people. So if we're systematically leaving out large parts of the population, which includes things like gender diversity, racial diversity, levels of disability, all kinds of neurodiversity, things like that, there's all kinds of different demographic markers that we're leaving out. And this is problematic on a basic principle. I have a colleague in the UK who asks the question in a flip-wise kind of way. So instead of saying, why aren't there more women elected? She asks, why are there so many men elected? Yeah. What is that all about? So that's one issue, is about this sort of justice and democracy. The second thing really is about outcomes. And this goes to the point about, people go into politics to achieve certain kinds of goals. They care about policy issues. So in Jill's case, for example, really cared about childcare and other related issues. And maybe it's about fish plants, but maybe it's not. But we have issues that we care about. And those issues are imbued with factors from our lives that influence how we feel about things. So, I have kids. Before I had kids, I didn't know what it was like to have kids. I didn't think about kids, right? I didn't think about childcare. I didn't think about women's reproductive health or, fertility issues. I didn't think about any of those things. But experiencing them led me to think about them more. And that's the beauty of having a diverse legislature, is that people bring their personal lived experience into that space to then create legislation about important issues that affect all kinds of different groups, whether it's about parental leave or childcare, whether it's about gender-based violence, whether it's about reproductive health, whether it's about immigrant rights, whether it's about Indigenous rights, clean drinking water, all kinds of issues that we don't think about unless we've lived them. And so that's the second piece of why it's important to have women and gender diversity and all diversity in general, is because the more diverse a legislature we have, the more innovative we can be with our policy making. We bring up new ideas. The old ways don't always matter. So by having new voices, having new perspectives, you get new ideas and you can lead down the road to new policy options. And I think, as we know today, the challenges that face society are really big. Many of them seem very intractable. Climate change, how do we fix that? Well, I don't know, but maybe some people do. And if we allow for a more diverse legislature, we get more perspectives and we get different kinds of expertise and experience and backgrounds. And that can lead to better discussions, better policy making, and so on.
Build some empathy, right? We've got about 30 seconds. We're at the final, we have less than a minute. So 30 final thoughts, Ruth Lawrence?
Yeah, I was going to say the big ideas might have different solutions to them. Just to go along with that, I want to go, the reason I want to see a different sort of government than we have is that I'd like to see a government that reflects our community, and our community is changing and has changed, and I just would like to see a government that reflects that change.
Gillian, final thoughts? 30 seconds, 20 seconds really.
If you want to run, do it. Find someone who has access to a bigger, more powerful network than you. Ask them to raise you some money, and ask people to not be so hard on themselves. And the expectation is we want people to get into this job, so we have to make it a little bit easier for them as a community, as a society. Sure,
Gambin-Walsh. No relation, by the way, that I know. 10 seconds to you. Final thought.
I believe that female voices and perspectives are very important. We have a different lived experiences. We are nurturers by nature. We are great multitaskers, and we put a different perspective lens on legislation. And I certainly encourage all my females out there to run. To put your name, if you're thinking about running, please reach out to us, have that discussion with us. I certainly encourage you to run.
Thank you so much. Ruth, if people want to see the play, 10 seconds, where do they go?
LSPU Hall website, you can get tickets for Thursday to Sunday afternoon, and all the information's there.
All right, thanks, folks. Your Olympic update's next. We'll be back tomorrow with another show. Cheers.